Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining us for this very productive bipartisan delegation and visit to the Halifax International Security Forum. We've had, throughout most of the weekend, we had an equal number of Republicans and Democrats here. We have lost Senators Tillis and Hoeven, who had to go back early. But I think it was very important for us to be here to, again, reinforce the importance of the U.S.-Canada relationship at a time that it has been viewed as fragile by many people, including many of my constituents in New Hampshire. I want to begin by pointing out that earlier this afternoon, Secretary Rubio spoke with members of our delegation. He's on his way to Geneva. He was on the plane when he called us to meet with our European partners, to meet with a high-level Ukrainian delegation to discuss the 28-point plan that's been circulating. Throughout the weekend, I have made it clear that I believe this is a Russian proposal. I hope that tomorrow's negotiations in Geneva focus on a real framework for negotiation that guarantees an outcome that benefits Ukraine rather than Russia. I think any real peace plan needs to be sustainable and backed by Ukraine's government and its people. It should be developed in full consideration and consultation with our allies who are going to help guarantee a ceasefire and any long-term peace deal. It should include meaningful security guarantees that assure Ukraine and our allies on the continent that we won't see Russia invade Ukraine again in a few years. And I think the United States Congress, on a bipartisan basis, including here at this forum, if you listen to the members of this delegation, have reiterated our support for Ukraine. We believe it's critical that we maintain intelligence sharing and military assistance should remain in place until a real peace deal is reached. So again, let me just close by pointing out that this is my last trip to the Halifax Forum in an official capacity. I have been very honored to be able to join this forum over many years and have been especially honored to lead the U.S. delegation for the last many years. So let me turn it over now to my co-lead from South Dakota, Senator Rounds.
Thank you, Senator Shaheen. And let me just add, first of all, my congratulations to Senator Shaheen for the work that she's done and our appreciation for the bipartisan manner in which she has conducted herself at all of these events. It has been and it is truly a pleasure to work with her. She is results-oriented, and she is a very special force within the United States Senate. So we've appreciated the working relationship with her. Senator Shaheen mentioned that Secretary Rubio did make a phone call to us this afternoon. I think he made it very clear to us that we are the recipients of a proposal that was delivered to one of our representatives. It is not our recommendation. It is not our peace plan. It is a proposal that was received, and as an intermediary, we have made arrangements to share it, and we did not release it. It was leaked. It was not released by our members or our representatives. So as we move through on this thing here, Representative Rubio has made it clear that this is an opportunity to have received it and that it has been utilized and delivered to the Ukrainians, and that they will have an opportunity to respond, and that in doing so, you now have one side being presented and the opportunity for the other side to respond. And I just want to say one more thing. I'm going to come back now out of that particular issue, and I just want to share with you, it is truly a pleasure to come here and to be a part of this. I'm from South Dakota, and South Dakota has lots of friends in Canada. We appreciate the working relationship. We've appreciated the ongoing trade relationships. We know that there's a real discussion regarding trade. We just hope to be able to resolve, to take care of those differences, get that behind us as quickly as possible, and move back into a position to where everybody is comfortable with the trade arrangements that we have. We still consider the Canadians to be some of our closest friends, and we appreciate the working relationship, not just on the economic side, but on the military side as well. So we appreciate the hospitality here, and we most certainly look forward to continuing a very good relationship with our friends and colleagues right here. And with that, I would offer now Senator Coons, who is one of the members who has continued to come up here and be a part of it, and we appreciate his friendship and working with him as well. Senator Coons.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Shaheen, Senator Rounds. You've done a tremendous job leading this delegation. It's been great at this moment in U.S.-Canada relations and in developments in the world to have a robust bipartisan delegation of 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans across many different committees. I first came to Halifax at the insistence of late Senator John McCain, and for me one of the highlights is always getting to hear the award of the John McCain Prize this year delivered to John Alvis, who gave his life in Azerbaijan, I believe 15 or maybe 25 years ago, while serving with the International Republican Institute, and for our delegation or members of it to meet with representatives from many countries. We met with defense ministers or parliamentarians from Canada, from the Netherlands, from the EU, from Colombia, from Ukraine, from Taiwan, from Venezuela, many other countries, folks who represent aspirations for freedom from all over the world. We are in a challenging moment for our relationships in the world, and I am personally deeply grateful for the friendship between the United States and Canada, for the opportunity to have frank and open conversations. My little state of Delaware, our biggest export market, has for decades been Canada. We have long benefited from tourism from Canadians, and it's my hope that we can move past the current challenges in our trade relationship and get back on track for a positive relationship in the near future. I'm the senior Democrat on defense appropriations and was very encouraged to hear about the passage of the recent budget, significant investments in joint Arctic security, and in the likely path forward in terms of our shared security contributions. And in particular, I'm grateful for Canada's sustained partnership with Latvia in security. I'm now going to hand the podium over to the former governor of the great state of Maine, someone who serves on the Armed Services and Intelligence Committees, my dear friend, Senator Angus King.
Thank you. First, the real reason Tom Tillis left early was the shameless beatdown I administered to him on the panel. That's a joke, you all. Please don't write that down.
They're not laughing.
I know. Jokes don't play well in print. Have you ever noticed that? This has been an extraordinary weekend, both because of the sessions that we've had with people from all over the world, but also because of the communication, as was mentioned today, from Secretary Rubio and the leaked 28-point plan, which, according to Secretary Rubio, is not the administration's position. It is essentially the wish list of the Russians that is now being presented to the Europeans and to the Ukrainians. It does provide a guideline to try to narrow the issues between Ukraine and Russia. And the encouraging thing to me is that the administration is not attempting to negotiate this agreement unilaterally, but indeed is in close consultation in the next few days with Ukraine and with our European allies. So I think that's an important development. All of us read that statement yesterday. We're alarmed by it, I think. That's a fair statement. It turns out that it is a sort of a beginning point for negotiations, and we'll see where the discussions go from here. Everyone wants this war to end, but we want it to end on a fair and just peace that respects the integrity and the sovereignty of the country of Ukraine, and does not reward aggression, and also provides adequate security guarantees so that something like what occurred in 2022 does not occur again. The programs like this you've seen us. We've been in the various plenary sessions, but we've also as was mentioned, had a whole series of bilateral meetings with representatives from Ukraine, Colombia, the Netherlands, there have been a long series of meetings today. Those are always very valuable, and it's ones that we will take back in our work in the U.S. Senate. So this is a very important conference, and it's one that I think has been especially valuable this year in terms of the forefront of the Ukraine issue, which is exactly where it belongs. I want to turn it over to Senator Kramer, who just is beginning his second term in the Senate and is a valued member of the Armed Services Committee, and we've worked together on a number of issues, and we look forward to the work that we're going to try to finish in the next few weeks in terms of the National Defense Authorization Act, as well as the defense budget and other budget bills that should be coming up between now and the end of the year. So, Senator Kramer.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator, Governor, Chairman. What Angus didn't share with you that I thought would be high on his obituary or resume would be the fact that he and I are the founding co-chairs of the American-Canadian Economic and Security Caucus, a very large and active bipartisan bicameral caucus. So the relationship between the United States and Canada is an everyday roll-up-your-sleeves working job for the two of us, as well as the rest of us. I also obviously represent a state that borders both Manitoba and Saskatchewan, have lots of friends, family, been to weddings and funerals up there, and the personal relationships are enduring as well as the diplomatic relationship. And we've got work to do on it, but I was very encouraged by these last couple of days with regard to the relationship with Canada. The meetings with Canadian members of Parliament, Minister, and others was very reassuring and very encouraging for me, and I'm grateful for that. I'm also very grateful to Senator Shaheen for thinking me worthy, frankly, and inviting me here to Halifax. But without question, is intriguing and compelling as some of the panels were, the bilateral meetings really were of utmost importance this weekend, and I'm grateful for all of that. I would also just maybe emphasize the point that while we're here celebrating democracy, it's important for all of us to remember that whatever is going to be determined by the negotiations between Russia and Ukraine, whatever role the United States, Europe, and all of our allies play, the decision is none of ours. It solely lies with the people and the democratically elected leadership of Ukraine. And we will be praying for them, we're cheering for them, we're encouraging them, but the ultimate decision will be theirs. And with that, I turn it over to my very good friend, former colleague in the House before, I'm really glad he's with me in the Senate, Senator Peter Welch of Vermont.
Thank you. Senator Shaheen, I just want to salute you for your steadfast leadership on this, and your partner here, Senator Rounds, as well. I was here 2 years ago, and there's two issues this year. One of them we didn't have last year. One is Ukraine, and this has been a grinding, brutal war. And the willingness of our EU allies and the United States are being put to the test as to whether we can stay by our Ukrainian allies who have been brutally attacked and are continuing to face the onslaught of brutal attacks on civilians to help Ukraine defend itself. And the good news is there is constant strong support from all of the participants who've been here, and that gives me a great deal of hope that we'll stay the course. The second thing that's new is, of course, the tariffs. And four of us have borders with Canada. We're very close, great bonds of affection, as well as enormous interaction economically. And in fact, 34 states, not just the border states. Canada's our biggest trading partner. Frankly, I think the tariffs are a huge mistake. They're doing enormous disruption to the economies of a lot of our small businesses and having a real impact on Canada. So we've got to work through that. And one of the things that I think is very important about us being here, a bipartisan delegation, is to make it very clear to our Canadian friends that we're your friends and we're going to do everything we can to put things back to the wonderful relationship that we've always had with Canada. Thank you.
Questions?
We'll have folks lined up at the microphones here in the aisles. And just to reiterate, we're going to stick with one question per person until everyone has had the opportunity to, and then we can do follow-ups in seconds.
Oh, maybe
Joe?
not.
Maybe not. Joe, you want to kick us off?
Thanks so much for doing this. I wanted to ask you, one of the points in this
Could you identify yourself,
Oh,
please?
sorry, Joe Gould with Politico.
He's teasing, he knows who you are.
For everybody else, one of the points in the 28-point plan involves security guarantees, NATO-style security guarantees. If I know that that's under negotiations, but would that need Congress's approval? And so, in a sense, would Congress get a say over whether, if that were included, would Congress get a say over a final deal?
I don't think that's clear. My colleagues may have a different point of view, but I think it is probably the most critical issue in terms of peace negotiations, because what we don't want is to have an aggressive Russia come back again in a couple of years, as they did after Crimea, as they did after Georgia, and continue to invade another sovereign country. So I think that's going to be really critical, and who performs those security guarantees and the size of Ukraine's army, I think, is a critical issue. Ukraine now has the most competent, largest, most experienced army in Europe. And that's important not just for Ukraine, it's important for Europe. And we need to ensure that they are able to continue to maintain that force. I don't know if anybody wants to add.
The only thing that I would add to that is if they're talking about a NATO guarantee, remember, it would require NATO members to be able to approve that as well. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, hi, Mike Blanchfield, Politico Canada. Senator Kramer, a moment ago, you said you're seeking reassurance in your meetings today. Can you expand on what exactly did you need to be reassured about? What troubles you about the state of things these days?
I don't recall saying that exactly, but what I.
Okay, did you need reassurance?
Frankly, what I was most reassured by today, and maybe that's what I was alluding to, was the conviction of the other European leaders we met with, and not just European, Taiwanese, in a private meeting with South Koreans that I had. I was very encouraged by their steadfastness. And the reason I say that is because while the United States, and particularly President Trump, has been a bit of a pincushion at this event for people, it was him who called on NATO to step it up, and NATO responded. But what really got NATO members stepping up was, of course, necessity. I don't know that Sweden thought much about being a member of NATO before, but it's damned important now. And I just was very comforted by, again, the strong commitment that I heard from the various European leaders in terms of their conviction and commitment to increasing their defense spending and modernizing their defense systems.
Hello, Justin Lang. I'm a columnist at the Toronto Star. I'm wondering if we can talk a bit about how it is that this plan came out. We were to understand that Dmitriev and Steve Witkoff had gotten together to develop a plan. This version came out. The White House said that Ukraine had to Thursday to agree to it, or else there could be a cutoff of supply and intelligence. It was then kind of spun that this was an attempt to get Ukraine at the table, to compromise. But now we're being told that, in fact, it was all a mistake and it's just Russia's position from the very beginning. The Americans, Europeans, and Ukrainians are left kind of doing, pardon the phrase here, but the Kremlinology of who exactly in the White House is calling the shots about this negotiating position. Can you shed any light on any of that?
Look, I'm not going to speak for the White House on that. But what I will say is that it is totally unacceptable that that plan got out, representing only Russia's perspective on a settlement with Ukraine. And what is in that plan, from my perspective, is whether we're talking about NATO guarantees that there will be no further NATO enlargement, whether it is giving Russia control over Ukraine's military in the future, whether it's a discontinuation of intelligence sharing. There is so much in that plan that is totally unacceptable if we're going to have a real negotiation that is going to actually produce a peace deal for Ukraine and Russia.
Okay, let me just fill out, because, look, we're doing this on a bipartisan basis. We were there when Secretary Rubio made the phone call, and the number one, I did ask, can we say that we've received the phone call from you? And he says, yes. And can we explain basically what had occurred? And he said, yes. And so what we can share with you is the federal government, or this administration was not responsible for the release of this information in its current form. But we can also tell you that at this point, they want to be able to utilize it as a starting point for where Russia is making demands. And in doing so, the response is we're going to share it with Ukraine as an intermediary, and we're going to ask for them to respond back in a timely fashion. And then in responding back, that now begins perhaps a negotiation in which there may be lots and lots of space between where it's not hardly doable to bring it together, or maybe there's enough there to begin talking about what could be acceptable, what is not acceptable, and what might be acceptable if further negotiated. But the intent was to take what had now been publicly discussed in news reports and to allow the Ukrainians the opportunity to respond back to it. But and I can also share this with you, we are not aware of any discussion by the administration of limiting support based upon that discussion.
Nick?
Nick Schifrin from PBS NewsHour. I think we should keep going on this. Senator Rounds, you started a sentence earlier. It is a proposal that was received. So just to be clear, did the Russians give this to Witkoff? Should there be consequences on Witkoff, as McConnell suggested? Is the threat of the U.S. pulling out of Pearl and intelligence cooperation off the table? Did Driscoll know this was a Russian document? And how in the world would the White House stand by what Rubio knew was a Russian document for the last 4 days?
What I can share with you is what we've received today from the Secretary, and what he told us was that this was not the American proposal. This was a proposal which was received by someone who has identified and they believe to be representing Russia in this proposal. It was given to Mr. Witkoff. We don't know among ourselves right now whether there was further questioning or any modifications that were done at that time, any other suggestions along that line. But what we do know is that while that had been received, none of the information that was released on this particular proposal came back from the administration. It was released apparently by the entity that had originally discussed it with U.S. representatives. But to be clear, and our concern was that there be any misunderstanding that this was a United States proposal. It is not.
And so
And
therefore,
Furthermore, with regard to the discussion that there would be threats of items taken in terms of information being withheld and so forth, the Secretary did say that he was not aware of any of that. So
no threats.
all we can do is just share with you that he was not aware of that.
And if I may just ask again,
Nick, we'll go to this side here.
Nice try, though.
Michael McDonald, Canadian Press. This is a question for Senator Kramer, but I'd also like to invite other members of the delegation to speak up if you feel the need to. Earlier today, Senator King said that he had noticed that there had been a cultural break between Canadians and Americans. He said that Canadians now see Americans as adversaries. I'd like to ask you what you think about that, considering you border right on the
Yeah.
Canadian.
Being aware that I'm standing right behind.
Yeah, behind is the important geographic situation. But, so I think there's become a tension. I will tell you, and I've asked the ambassador this a couple of times, I will tell you that I think it's manifest largely in much less travel from Canada to the States for pleasure. In North Dakota, that happens to be shopping in the malls and staying in the hotels, buying lots of beer and groceries and other things. For Florida, it's you're going to the beach, and as it is for some of my colleagues up here. And those numbers are down because people are angry. They are bouncing back a little bit. I mean, I've talked to my tourism people in North Dakota. They're bouncing back a little bit. One thing about it, as winter comes on, I know a lot about the weather in Canada. It's a lot like North Dakota, and there's only one direction to go. And so I suspect that it probably won't keep some people from going to warmer weather. Having said that, it's such an unusual situation for us because, as Angus pointed out, I mean, and Peter, I mean, our relationship with Canadians is very, very personal, you know, in certain circumstances and in specific ways. I will say, though, at the same time, I've asked the ambassador this a couple of times. I might have even asked Prime Minister Carney. I don't quite understand why, I guess I don't offend that easily. Maybe that's the best way to put it. I don't offend that easily, so it's hard for me. It's why I'm so offensive, quite honestly, probably because I'm not sensitive. But the best way to fix this is to get back to the negotiating table and fix whatever it is that separates us on the trading table. Now, we know that of a couple of the high, softwood lumber, for example, and dairy, some of those sticking points, but there are a couple, maybe 4 dozen or more, what I'd consider small, non-tariff barrier nuisances. I just say, let's get back to that table and fix those things up. This is not a situation that can't be recovered. This is not a family breakup that's going to result in, in people hating each other. Both sides, I'm convinced, people in both countries are anxious to reunite, symbolically as well as literally. My uncle still comes down occasionally to North Dakota, and I get to see him just this last summer, in fact. So I suspect that's what Angus was speaking to, but I think I know what he's talking about, and we all sense it.
All right, and just flagging, we have just about 5 minutes left. We'll try to get as much as we can in during that time. So Jamie, please.
Jamie Tarabay, Bloomberg. Question for Senator Shaheen. Can you tell us more about this phone call with Secretary Rubio? Like, how did it come about? Did you reach out to him? Did he reach out to you? And when did this phone call happen? And for Senator Rounds, obviously there's a lot of, you can tell, bewilderment at the idea that the administration had allowed this plan to sort of be out there in the world as a legitimate plan that the administration was taking phone calls from international leaders about and that we've been talking about all weekend. How do you square that with the Secretary now telling you to tell everyone that it's not even an American plan in the first place?
Well, let me say that Secretary Rubio reached out to me, and Senator Rounds and I were both on the call. He also had separate conversations with some other members of the delegation.
Was that this evening or?
This afternoon.
This afternoon.
It was this afternoon. And he called, as I said, en route to Geneva for the negotiations. And I think it was very helpful to hear from him. I don't know, Mike, if you want to characterize any other
I would just say,
aspects of it.
look, it was our request. One of our members made contact and said, hey, can you tell us the rest of the story here? This doesn't look like normally something that would come out of our government, particularly the way that it was written. It looked more like it was written in Russian to begin with. And so we just wanted to get what actually happened. And he got on the phone, was very frank about it, and just said, here's the rest of the story. And we said, can we share that story? And he said, yes. And so, I don't know if we can give you all the details, because I'm not sure we got all the details from him in terms of time delays, except remember, these folks are moving around the world right now. And so I'm not sure what the time delay is. I'm not even sure when this was actually released to begin with. I think we got a hold of it yesterday. is when we saw it, I think, when we got here. So,
That's correct.
yeah, so I can't answer that. And I think Angus was there. You had a phone call as well with him.
Yeah, I served for 12 years with Marco Rubio on the Intelligence Committee, and we got to know each other pretty well. And I texted him this morning, based upon my concerns about what this plan was all about, and what we were seeing on the leaked document. And I got a text back this afternoon and said, are you around for a call? And so he and I had a quite a lengthy conversation, which basically was the same as what was characterized from Senator Rounds and Senator Shaheen. And I think it's fair to say that this document represents the Russian position. It's now been presented to the Europeans and to the Ukrainians, and they're going to review it and come back. And the question is, are there things that they can accept and things that they won't? And what are the red lines on either side? And how are they going to try to get from 28 to 12 or 14 or whatever it ends up being? In terms of, somebody mentioned the president mentioning Thanksgiving. If you read his whole comment, he said something about, well, there are deadlines and then there are deadlines and they should get back to us at Thanksgiving. I don't think that was meant as a hard and fast deadline, and there was no discussion that I've seen of, if you don't get back to us by Thanksgiving, we're going to cut off intelligence sharing or support for the equipment necessary in Ukraine. So I think right now we are in the midst of an honest negotiation, and it may end up not going anywhere. But I think I didn't know that Senator Rubio was going to call these guys. I just reached out to him myself because of the concern that I had.
Thank you. Thank
All
you.
right, we're just almost at time. Let's go to the Kyiv Independent, try to get a few more in. Speed round.
Alexei Sorokin, Kyiv Independent, traveling from Kyiv and speaking to Ukrainian leadership. Ukrainian leadership feels cornered right now because of this American-Russian proposal. So my question is practical. If President Trump actually goes down on his promise and says that he will cut military intelligence to Ukraine and he will insist for Ukraine to accept these terms, will Congress put forward the sanctions bill finally on the floor and show President Trump that Congress supports imposing sanctions on Russia? And also building on this, is Congress planning other means of stopping President Trump from pressuring Ukraine to give up Donbass and Ukrainian territory to Russia? Thank you.
Well, first of all, let me just point out that, as you've heard, there's nothing that we understand that the administration has said that they intend to cut off either the Pearl program or intelligence sharing. There is language in the defense authorization bill that is about to go through Congress that has been negotiated that addresses intelligence sharing and the need to notify Congress. Hopefully those provisions will stay in. You have probably heard me say, I know some in this room have, that months ago we should have taken up the Graham-Blumenthal sanctions bill. There are two bills in the House that they're looking at a discharge petition on. One would deal with sanctions and one would deal with not just sanctions but additional support. I think either one of those would be helpful, and in fact, at this point, the Graham-Blumenthal bill and those secondary sanctions has a waiver you could drive a truck through. So I think we need to have something that's stronger than that. The Senate Foreign Relations Committee passed out 3 bills, the first bills that have come out of our committee, going after Russia. One would sanction Chinese companies that support Russia's war machine. One would allow us to use the seized assets in the United States to benefit Ukraine. And the third, which I'm always forgetting, do you remember? Yes, the state sponsor of terrorism. Thank you. I'm glad you're following it. For the kidnapping of Ukrainian children. So I think all 3 of those bills we are very interested in moving through the floor of the Senate, and I think there's a lot of support in the House. So I think Congress, you're going to see the kind of support that's been reflected in this delegation reflected in Congress writ large. And if you saw the responses from Mitch McConnell, who chairs the Defense approach subcommittee, and Senator Coons might want to speak to that, and Senator Wicker, who chairs the Armed Services Committee in the Senate, they were very strong in opposition to that 28-point plan and the need for us to support Ukraine.
Just to be clear, we unanimously see this as a war of Russian aggression against Ukraine and are grateful for, impressed by, and intend to continue to support those Ukrainians who have been fighting for their sovereignty and freedom since Russia began its invasion of Ukrainian territory back in 2014. On the Defense Appropriations Subcommittee, Chairman McConnell and I, the ranking member, have worked hard to put back into our defense appropriations bill this year significant support for Ukraine, both on the intelligence side and the defense side. It passed our committee 26-3. It is ready for action by the full Senate. It should be the next thing we move to when we return from our Thanksgiving recess. And bluntly, I think we should be moving legislation that makes clear that we will not threaten to withhold intelligence or access to American munitions, particularly the surface-to-air defense missiles that are so critical to defending Ukraine and Ukrainian civilians from the daily assault by Russia. This proposal should not lead to Ukraine having to surrender territory, having to make a concession under duress by the United States. Speaking for myself, I think that is the wrong thing for us to do, and we should instead continue to join vital and trusted allies like Canada in continuing to support Ukraine in its fight for freedom. Thank you.
We'll unfortunately do last question to Stephen.
Hi, Steve Chase with the Globe and Mail newspaper. Thank you for coming to Canada, and we really appreciate your insight, and you're an important component of this event. I want to return to the Canada-U.S. relations. I want to ask, you talked about how 34 states have Canada as their biggest export market. My question for you is, we're not at the table because your president broke it off over images on TV. So this is not a genteel dispute about dairy and softwood. It's something akin to economic warfare. He's got 50% tariffs on steel, destroying the steel industry, 50% tariffs on aluminum, 36% tariffs on softwood, 25% tariffs on cars. Most of those industries grew to supply your country. So what are you doing to get Mr. Trump back to the table?
I'm going to let my Republican colleagues answer that, but first let me just say that the two women who are in line, we're going to take your questions before we go. Don't worry. And what I will tell you what I've done. I've introduced legislation to address the ability under our IEEPA law to invoke tariffs, because this is not an emergency as far as I'm concerned, and I think the Supreme Court seems to have serious reservations about that. I led an amicus brief with 36 other senators, bipartisan, and 171 House members to the Supreme Court in support of that position, that the President does not have the authority to invoke these tariffs under U.S. law. And by the way, I also think we ought to urge the administration to take up USMCA, get this trade deal done so that we can stop the tariffs, because they are not only damaging your economy, they're damaging our economy. In New Hampshire, I can quote you business after business that I visited that has told me that the tariffs that have been invoked on Canada and what's happened with the relationship has been detrimental to their business, and it's affecting our economy. So I certainly share the view that we need to address this.
Yeah. Thank you for the question, a good observation. With regard to the President's response to Premier Ford's very ill-advised TV ad, one thing about President Trump, I know him quite well, he understands that 340 million is 300 million more than 40. And that when he gets pushed back like that, he's going to respond. Now, I wish I'd have been with him when the ad ran, because I would have said, sir, just think about this. This would be like you being held responsible for a governor's actions. I love Doug Ford. I think he and Donald Trump should be best friends, quite honestly. But having said all that, you're right, we should be able to put that behind us. With regard to the steel and aluminum and automobile piece of it, that is, I think, of the most importance in terms of the actual trade part of this. I don't know what the line is where the president, I do visit with Jameson Group pretty regularly, as well as Ambassador Hillman. I don't know where exactly the line is where he'll say, okay, that's enough of it, we're going to have enough of that here in the United States. They can have the rest, or I'm not sure what the thinking is. I understand the integration of our supply chain and that it's actually intentional by the companies that did it. And he just wants to change that formula. However, I'll tell you what I'm encouraged by, and nobody's talked about yet this week that I can think of, maybe in one of the sessions, but the announced deal with Ambassador Hillman and Secretary Noem on the icebreaker issue, it's one that I was involved in very early on, was a very encouraging sign. To me, it was a warming of, a thawing of the trade piece of this relationship. It acknowledges an acknowledgement by the president that we're not building ships very well in the United States, an acknowledgement that the company up here, along with Finland, is good at icebreakers, and by golly, they needed some extra manufacturing space, and they chose Texas. Those are the kinds of deals that turn into bigger deals. I'm fairly confident that that was the first of several things to come about. And all I can say is I stay in pretty regular contact with the administration on these things. I've been a little bit frustrated, as you have, by how many cooks are in that kitchen. But I do feel like it's becoming pretty clear to everybody. And by the way, if you hadn't noticed, the president has been taking down some tariffs, little by little, country by country. He is noticing the inflationary outcome of some of those specific tariffs. I happen to think that the softwood lumber, and I know Peter and I have talked somewhat about this, or Chris and I have talked somewhat about this, that's probably the most obvious next inflationary product, because it gets into home building. And everybody needs a home, and our home builders need product, and it's becoming more and more inflationary. So I'm hopeful that the combination of all of those things, please, make sure that Danielle Smith or something doesn't, challenge him on something. She won't. But if you leave it to the negotiators, I think we're in a pretty good place. Yeah.
I think the tariffs are economic folly and illegal.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And that's the one good point, though, that Gene raised. The Supreme Court is going to have a say on the AIPA piece of all of this.
Danielle.
Women only from now on.
Thank you, Senator Shaheen, for your act of rebellion. Senators, a European official has confirmed to me that the reports of a threat by the president to cut off military intelligence sharing with Ukraine are true. And starting with Senator Rounds, what makes you certain you are being told the same thing by the administration on military aid and intelligence sharing as they are telling Ukraine and Russia?
All that I can share with you, because I specifically asked the Secretary this afternoon whether or not that was an accurate statement regarding that threat. And he told me, his message, and I believe I can say this precisely, he said he was not aware of that threat being made. So that's all I can share with you, is he was not aware that that threat had been made.
Final question.
Last but not least, Amy McKinnon with the Financial Times, and thank you, Senator Shaheen, for the extra time. We've been speaking to the administration about this plan for the past few days now, but there's also plenty on the record, and I just wanted to read out a couple of statements. And Senator Rounds, I'd like to get your reaction to this. Here's one from U.S. Army spokesperson Colonel Dave Butler, who told reporters in Kiev that Driscoll and Zelensky had agreed on an aggressive timeline for a signature of the peace plan, that it will be an agreement between the U.S. and Ukraine for starters. On Thursday, Caroline Leavitt at the podium in the White House said that Special Envoy Witkoff and Secretary Rubio had been working on this plan quietly for a month. She also said that Trump endorsed the plan. So now Rubio says that this is not a U.S. plan, it's a proposal that they received, and it should never have gotten out. So it sounds like somebody's being dishonest, but who is it?
No, I can just simply share with you what Secretary Rubio shared with us today. And that was the information that we had received that we looked at and said, this looks more like a Russian proposal. We asked, is this, where's this come from? And he said, this was a product that had been presented to Mr. Witkoff, and that, it was not our proposal, and that it was an opportunity, though, for the U.S. as an intermediary to bring it to the attention of the Ukrainians, and I believe the Europeans as well. And that's where he left it. And so when we asked, where's this stuff coming from and so forth, he did share with us where it came from, who the individual that had brought it in and so forth, and had delivered it to Mr. Witkoff. And that afterwards, it appears that that individual had also shared it with the press. But it was not Mr. Witkoff that had done so, and that it was not a U.S. proposal, but it was one that had been received by the U.S. as the intermediary, and that it had been shared with us.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you. It's clear it's not red, that's it.